Welcome to the debate. Imagine your phone buzzing right now with a notification. It tells you that based on what you bought at the grocery store, how you slept last night, and maybe a slight variation in your genome, you are going to develop diabetes in exactly 4 years unless you put down the bread.
Which sounds completely like science fiction, right?
Exactly. But with the collision of modern AI and biology, we are essentially already there. I mean, human biology has always been treated a bit like a black box, but today that box has basically burst wide open. A single human body produces just a ceaseless torrent of data.
Oh, absolutely.
We are talking 100,000 heartbeats every single day, 3 billion genetic base pairs in your DNA, and, if you're wearing a continuous glucose monitor, 288 precise glucose readings every 24 hours.
And that is just one person. When you scale that globally across billions of people, the sheer volume of biological information is staggering. We aren't just swimming in data, we are drowning in it.
Precisely. And that brings us to the central question of our discussion today, which emerges from a really fascinating collection of recent academic papers and symposia focusing on AI, body analytics, metagenomics, and personalized medicine. So as artificial intelligence begins to cross-reference and fuse these disparate data streams globally, does this capability fundamentally empower precise predictive health?
Or, conversely, does the staggering complexity of biological data risk dangerous over-medicalization? Are we basically going to end up chasing mathematical illusions and spurious correlations?
Right. It is the ultimate tension right now in modern medicine.
It really is. It's the friction between raw computational power and the messy, nonlinear reality of human biology.
Exactly. So I will be arguing that AI successfully harmonizes this biological chaos into precise, actionable foresight. We finally have the tools to understand the whole picture.
And I will argue that applying these algorithms to this specific type of data introduces something mathematically terrifying called the curse of dimensionality. And because of that, we are inevitably headed toward algorithmic biases, false positives, and severe over-medicalization.
Let's get right into it then. Historically, traditional medicine has been severely limited by cognitive bottlenecks and, frankly, data silos. Think about it. A cardiologist looks at your EKG.
Right.
An endocrinologist looks at your fasting glucose. A geneticist looks at your DNA. They are analyzing fragments. But the human body doesn't operate in fragments. Poor sleep elevates your cortisol, which spikes your blood sugar, which strains your heart. Human clinicians simply cannot hold thousands of interacting biomarkers in their head simultaneously.
Well, they are computers, obviously.
Exactly. And AI overcomes this cognitive limit because it can fuse this data orthogonally.
Wait, let me jump in here. When you say fuses this data orthogonally, that sounds like something straight out of a physics textbook. Let's make sure we're grounded here for a second.
Fair point. Fair point. Orthogonal basically means coming at a problem from completely independent right-angle directions. Think of it like trying to predict traffic. If you only look at the number of cars on the road, that's a silo.
Okay.
But if you orthogonally fuse data, meaning you combine the car count with the local weather forecast, the city's construction schedule, and, a major sporting event happening downtown, suddenly your prediction is infinitely more accurate. AI is doing this for the human body, using tools like multimodal transformers and graph neural networks.
But you're assuming...
Just to finish the thought, it connects your genetic mutations, your SNPs, with your smartwatch data and your medical records. Look at DeepMind's Alpha Missense. It successfully cross-referenced 71 million missense variants with clinical phenotypes to flag which genetic mutations actually cause disease. It is actively turning biological noise into clarity.
I come at it from a completely different way, though. You are assuming the AI knows how to perfectly weigh the weather against the traffic, to use your analogy. But biological systems are deeply nonlinear and incredibly noisy. When you apply machine learning to this environment, you immediately hit that mathematical nightmare I mentioned earlier, the curse of dimensionality.
For those listening who might not be, deep into data science, how would you define the curse in this context?
It's basically what happens when you give an algorithm way too much information and not enough examples. In these massive biological data sets, the number of variables, the thousands of genes, proteins, and continuous vital signs, vastly outnumbers the actual patient samples you have.
Right? The ratio is flipped.
Exactly. Let's say you have 100 patients, but you are tracking 10,000 different data points on each of them. When variables outnumber samples, models inevitably overfit. They literally memorize the specific noise of those 100 people instead of learning the universal underlying biology of the disease. The AI will find a pattern that perfectly separates the sick from the healthy just by sheer random chance.
But that assumes we're just throwing raw data at a wall to see what sticks.
We often are. Traditional AI struggles massively with confounding variables, which risks treating mathematical artifacts rather than actual diseases. For example, if you run a proteomics dataset on a population in Delhi, the AI might identify a molecular pattern and label it a novel disease signal, when in reality it's just the biological footprint of urban air pollution.
I see the risk there.
We risk building an entire infrastructure of precision medicine on top of statistical illusions.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective on how AI actually handles this so-called noise, particularly when we look at continuous monitoring. Let's move away from the abstract math for a second and look at the practical reality of wearables and sensors.
Sure.
We aren't just feeding raw, chaotic data into these models. AI handles this perfectly via incredibly robust pre-processing pipelines. Let's take along short-term memory networks, or LSTMs.
The neural networks designed for sequential data, yeah?
Exactly. Standard algorithms just look at a snapshot in time. LSTMs have a built-in memory. They can look at your continuous glucose monitor and understand how a blood sugar spike on Tuesday relates to a dip on Friday.
Right. They map the timeline.
Yes, and in a recent Mayo Clinic study across the US, Europe, and Asia, LSTMs devoured 14-day continuous glucose monitor time series data to predict the Masuda index with 88% accuracy. And the Masuda index is the gold standard proxy for insulin resistance.
Okay, but
On the genomic side, tools like Google's Deep variant use convolutional neural networks, the same tech used for advanced image recognition, to visually filter sequencing noise and distinguish true genetic variants with 99.9% accuracy. The signal is being successfully isolated from the noise.
that is a compelling argument for the technical accuracy of the tools, I'll grant you that. But have you considered the clinical utility of this hyper-surveillance?
What do you mean?
You mentioned the Matsuda Index and continuous glucose monitors. Let's think about how a living, breathing patient interacts with this constant stream of biological information. If a patient has an app delivering daily scores saying, your resistance index rose 5% from weekend carbs, you are generating a massive psychological burden.
Well, information is power.
But you are generating false positives and severe anxiety. Not all insulin resistance or minor biological fluctuations require medical intervention.
You think we are going to treat the data rather than the patient?
Absolutely we will. Biology fluctuates. That is homeostasis in action. Your body is constantly adjusting to keep you stable. By tracking every single biochemical twitch and throwing it into a predictive algorithm, we are paving a direct path to over-medicalization.
I don't think it has to lead there.
We're going to have people demanding pharmaceutical interventions for a temporary metabolic shift that their body would have naturally resolved by Wednesday.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it completely differently. Ignoring these subtle, early signals from wearables isn't protecting the patient. It's willful blindness. A lot of critics use the analogy that it's like obsessing over a car's check engine light before the engine fails. But I think that's the wrong way to look at it. It's more like meteorology.
Meteorology?
Yes. Traditional medicine looks out the window, sees it's raining, and says, yep, you have a disease. AI is looking at millions of invisible atmospheric pressure changes to say there is an 88% chance of a hurricane next Tuesday. It is probabilistic forecasting for your pancreas.
I'm not sure the weather is the best comparison.
And AI models are inherently probabilistic to specifically avoid the over-medicalization you're worried about. They don't just flag a spike, they calculate the probability of progression to chronic disease.
But forecasting a hurricane doesn't stop the hurricane.
In biology, it can. Look at Verta Health in the United States. Their AI analyzes this exact kind of continuous data and successfully reversed insulin resistance in 60% of cases.
Wow, 60%.
Yes. And how? By using lifestyle and keto dietary nudges. They use the high-resolution data to keep patients off of preemptive drugs like GLP-1 agonists, drugs like Ozempic. The technology empowered a precise, non-pharmacological intervention because the foresight was so accurate.
Okay, but your meteorology analogy assumes the AI actually knows what a healthy climate looks like for every type of region. If the baseline models for what constitutes normal biology are statistically flawed, how does scaling this technology globally affect diverse populations?
This is the gaping hole in the predictive health argument, the foundational statistical bias in current AI models. The data shows that 80% of global genomic data is heavily skewed toward Caucasian, European descent populations. Furthermore, 90% of bacterial databases are heavily skewed toward gram-negative bacteria found in specific Western demographics.
I absolutely acknowledge the statistical imbalances in the historical data. That's a known issue.
But it's more than just an imbalance. It translates directly to clinical danger. Applying these Western-centric models to diverse global populations actively causes physical harm through misdiagnosis. Harm is a strong word.
But it's true. For example, we know that predictive algorithms consistently underdiagnose lean diabetics. That is a phenotype very common in Asian populations, but the Western models associate diabetes heavily with a high body mass index. The AI looks at a lean patient in Tokyo and says, low BMI, no diabetes risk, completely missing the actual metabolic dysfunction, because the training data taught it that weight and diabetes are inextricably linked. Exactly. Or look at polygenic risk scores. The models trained heavily on European cohorts, like the UK Biobank, to predict disease risk across multiple genes. Because of their training data, they completely miss critical epistasis interactions in African lineages. Let's define epistasis quickly for the audience.
And tells another gene whether to turn on or off. It's a highly complex interaction. In African lineages, variants of the APOL1 gene have highly specific epistasis interactions that drive kidney disease. The European-trained AI doesn't even know to look for that interaction.
Right.
If we trust the algorithm blindly, we are mathematically codifying diagnostic blind spots on a planetary scale.
I don't disagree with the severity of that problem at all. But let me ask you this directly. Should we halt global medical advancement because the initial datasets were mathematically skewed, or should we use the technology itself to bridge the gap?
Well, obviously we want to bridge it.
Because AI is actively correcting these blind spots as we speak. When we face data scarcity in underrepresented populations, developers are now using generative adversarial networks, or GANs.
You're talking about generating synthetic data.
Yes, think of a GAN like a counterfeiter and a detective playing a game. One AI tries to generate a synthetic biological profile, say a South Asian metabolic profile, and the other AI tries to spot if it's fake. They play this game millions of times until the synthetic data is statistically indistinguishable from real data. We use this to balance the training sets without needing to instantly sequence a billion new genomes.
Simulating data is mathematically elegant, I'll give you that, but it doesn't invent biology that the machine has never seen. It's an echo chamber.
Which is exactly why we combine it with federated learning to access real, diverse data that is currently trapped behind privacy walls. Usually to train an AI, you have to bring all the data to one giant central server. Federated learning flips that. It allows the algorithm to travel to the data.
So leaving the data on the local devices.
Right. It's like sending the recipe to the kitchen instead of bringing all the ingredients to one central location. In Brazil, the SUS public health system is pulling insights from 50 million patient records. In India, the Beto app is doing the same for millions of diabetics.
Okay. They trained the model locally on their own diverse populations and only shared the updated mathematical weights, the learnings, back to the central model. This complies completely with strict privacy laws like Europe's GDPR, while hyper-localizing the accuracy. The AI learns Latin American fructose sensitivities just as well as it learns East Asian carbohydrate tolerances.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that simulating data with GANs or decentralizing the compute with federated learning fundamentally solves the epistemological limit of AI. Let's shift to how the machine actually interprets this complexity.
Okay, let's do that. Does the AI actually understand the mechanics of the human body, or is it just playing high-level statistical guessing games? Finding a complex pattern in a federated database in Brazil is not the same as identifying a true biological mechanism.
But it isn't just a guessing game. AI is actually mapping true biological networks. Let's look at the microbiome, which is famously complex. Traditional analysis could barely even culture these gut bacteria in a lab. Now, AI uses unsupervised clustering algorithms like k-means and dbScan.
Unsupervised, meaning human researchers aren't giving the AI the answers first?
Right, exactly. Imagine having a massive pile of unsorted laundry and asking a machine to sort it just by looking at similarities, without ever telling it what a shirt or a sock is. The AI applies this to petabytes of metagenomic data and organically discovers distinct enterotypes, or microbial communities in our gut.
It categorizes them, sure.
But it goes further than that. It uses graph neural networks to map the gut-brain axis. It represents bacteria as nodes and metabolites as the bridges between them. This is literally how AI discovered that a drop in a specific bacteria, Lactobacillus, predicts Parkinson's disease progression.
Well,
It's how it mapped that Bifidobacterium infantis literally feeds the anti-inflammatory bacteria Akkermansia. It is mapping causality, not just correlation. It even found an invisible outbreak signature of dengue fever 2 weeks before an outbreak by fusing mosquito genomic data with human immune profiles.
see, you are conflating high-dimensional correlation with biological causality. They are not the same thing. Without causal AI, specifically utilizing rigorous mathematical frameworks like do calculus, these models remain strictly observational.
Let's break down do calculus for the listener because it's vital to your point here.
Sure. So traditional AI asks, what do we observe? It sees that A and B happen together.
Right, simple correlation.
Do calculus forces the model to ask, what happens if we actively intervene and do something to A? Does B still happen? It simulates counterfactuals. Without that, the dengue fever example you gave is just a predictive correlation. It is not an understanding of the mechanism of the virus. And the danger of confounders in purely observational data is immense.
But the algorithms isolate the strongest predictive features. If it reliably predicts the disease, does the exact causal pathway matter in the short term?
Yes, it absolutely matters because they isolate statistical focus, not biological truth. Consider distinct metabolic profiles driven by cultural diets. The branched-chain amino acid spikes you see in meat-heavy Brazilian diets look entirely different from the lipid profiles of plant-heavy Okinawan diets.
Right, diet plays a huge role.
Exactly. And a purely observational AI might easily misinterpret these cultural baselines as pathological anomalies because it lacks causal reasoning. And even when developers try to be transparent and open the black box with explainable AI tools like SHAP values or GradCam heat maps, it's an illusion of understanding.
How is it an illusion? GradCam heat maps literally show clinicians what the AI is looking at.
Think of a GradCam heat map like a thermal camera for the AI's brain. It literally highlights in red the exact pixels on a medical scan or the exact metabolite in a blood test that made the AI trigger a diagnosis.
Which is helpful for the doctor.
Helpful maybe, but just because it highlights a spot doesn't mean it understands the biology. It tells the clinician the math relied heavily on this specific number. It absolutely does not tell us whether that association is biologically real, causal, or safe for determining a drug dosage.
But you are demanding perfection from a system that is already vastly outperforming human baselines. When transformer models process sequential data like circadian metabolome fluctuations over a 24-hour period, they capture long-range biological dependencies that human clinicians simply cannot see.
But seeing a pattern isn't the same as understanding it.
They are predicting kidney decline from urine proteomics years before expert nephrologists catch it. The AI doesn't need to perfectly simulate the laws of physics or map every causal pathway if the intervention it suggests, like adjusting a diet to reduce systemic inflammation, works reliably in millions of patients.
Works reliably is an incredibly dangerous assumption when we are talking about automating clinical decisions. If a model predicts a response to a cancer immunotherapy based on a high-dimensional pattern of tumor mutations, and we use that prediction to deny treatment to a patient it flags as a non-responder, we had better be absolutely certain that the model isn't just relying on an overlooked, confounding variable. We need intellectual humility here.
Which is exactly why the medical consensus is that these tools must be deployed as decision support, not autonomous doctors. They are the ultimate second opinion, The clinician is always in the loop.
A second opinion that clinicians are highly susceptible to deferring to? If a machine processes 3 billion genetic base pairs and spits out a risk score, the human doctor is going to trust the math because the math is too complex to challenge.
Well, training will evolve.
The biological orchestra is incredibly nuanced. Treating noisy data, biased cohorts, and high-dimensional statistical correlations as gospel risks deepening medical inequities and causing genuine harm under the guise of precision.
Well, we are nearing the end of our time, so let's synthesize where we stand. From my perspective, the fusion of multi-omics and AI acts as a global guardian. It democratizes access to hyper-personalized, preventative care that was once scientifically impossible. From the advanced oncology wards at the Mayo Clinic using multimodal AI to match therapies, to rural telemedicine networks in Nigeria using AI to optimize local probiotics for malnutrition, the technology is harmonizing fragments of biological data into life-saving foresight.
And my perspective remains a firm plea for caution. While the computational power is undeniably vast, the human body is not a simplified machine that can be fully decoded by simply throwing more data at a neural network. We must confront the reality of the curse of dimensionality, the severe limits of observational data, and the statistical biases in our global datasets. If we rush to clinical interventions based on algorithmic correlations without demanding causal proof, we are practicing reckless medicine.
I think it's fair to say we both agree that AI is forever changing the sheer scale at which we can observe human biology.
The ability to look at genomics, wearables, and electronic health
Records simultaneously is a massive paradigm shift, and we certainly agree that diversifying global data sets is the most critical hurdle facing the field today.
Indeed. Where we continue to fundamentally diverge is on the maturity of these current models. You view them as ready to safely inform personalized clinical interventions today. I view them as highly experimental tools that require rigorous causal validation before they intersect with patient lives.
This has been a deeply illuminating exchange. Looking at human health through these diverse technological and biological lenses offers immense value. For those listening, the underlying source material contains fascinating depths regarding quantum AI simulations and synthetic biology that we only just scratched the surface of today.
There is certainly a lifetime of complexity left to explore in this field.
As we sign off, I'd like to leave everyone with a thought to reflect on. We started by picturing the human body as a ceaseless torrent of data, an overwhelming, chaotic orchestra of biology. The question isn't just whether the machine can hear the music, it's whether we as humanity are finally ready to understand the symphony.